So we sit closer to each other and we talk a little bit more about LINA, what your organizations are doing, what are your plans, and also a little bit about the temporality and the issues around the main topic of the biennial. This will be a little bit more change of the agenda, but I invite everyone to get engaged and get closer to us so that we have more like a discussion rather than the panel talks. So, good morning once again. For those who don't know me, and I met first time today, I'm Otar Nemsadze. Thank you very much. It's good to have you back here. I know that at least one of our guests has to catch the plane, so let's use the rest of the time for discussion. I see that Tico wants to start. That it's quite a little bit challenging still for people, but we opened up third biennial yesterday, back to the physical space once again, and we talk about informality and everything that is related to the topic, and we try to answer the question, or at least start a discussion about the question, what's next. Today we open, and this is some kind of tradition that we have, that after the opening of the biennial, on the second day we have opening of the symposium. So I'm really happy that this is happening, and I'm happy that you managed to come in Tbilisi and you are here physically. So we changed a little bit of setup and the agenda of today's symposium. Initially we were planning to have it like more formal, let's call it that way. But now we are gathered in a group to talk about, first of all, LINA, and then talk about your organizations and their plans, and also a little bit around the topic of the biennial itself. I think that it's now, we can start directly, I think, and Matevž, maybe we'll start with you. Because you are heading LINA, and you can say a little bit about LINA for those who don't know it, and we will so so that we also transfer that information also online, that people can know a bit more about LINA, and then we'll go to the organization by organization. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us here, and congratulations on the biennial. I think it's very relevant thing you do, and it's important how you gather people and how you open topics, and it's also very close to what I am thinking about institutions and how I developed this in architecture, in Museum of Architecture and Design, first in Ljubljana. That's where it started. In 2010, when I was appointed director here, and it was a very obsolete institution, very silent. But when I came there, I found out that there are piles of archives, a lot of things, design, architectural archives, and there was no inventory. There were people that were kind of thinking they were not able to do something with it, and we started developing programs around collection, around presentation of this collection, around education, how to create dialogue in the city, how the museum can be at the same time a center of knowledge and a forum for discussions. And first we just opened it up. We brought everything that was in the storages piled up into exhibition rooms. We bought some furniture and we exhibited it for visitors to be able to see. And that was the start. Then we started building catalogs. But all the time I was asking myself, so why are we doing this? So why should we collect this old stuff? And what should we collect? What is the purpose of it? And along that, we were lucky also that the museum was the organizer of an international biennial of design. So in the beginning, from the beginning, it was like the treasure house, but at the same time it was a laboratory to think about the present situation. And we started to connect those two things. So like the biennial informed the working with the collection and the museum program with, let's say, give it more relevance and finding answers to these questions. Why do we need collections? Why are they relevant today? What can we do with them to open up discussions? At the end, we made an inventory of digitized, we digitized like 40,000 pieces that can also be accessed online today. And also people got to know about what we keep in our collection. So this island in the middle is Mao's collections in the middle of MoMA at the exhibition on Yugoslavian architecture, and this is an online archive now. These are images from the Biennial of Design, and here people are sitting on an old bus station designed by Sasha Mehtik, and all these bus stations were removed in the 90s from the cities, and this is the only one preserved in front of the Museum of Architecture and Design, also as part of his exhibition. We went out of Ljubljana, even to the landscapes, to talk with people about what design can do. The design biennial, it used to be Biennial of Industrial Design, opened up basically into a platform that is looking for fields where design can do things, not maybe traditional fields where you would not expect design, like farming or information, let's say news agencies. These were Corona times in the museum courtyard. But that's what led us also then to think about how can we do something meaningful in the field of architecture to trigger some discussions. And the European call for platforms that were supposed to support emerging professionals in different fields proved the right thing to use. To invite young people to talk about the future of architecture first. So this started in 2016, and our idea was simply to explore how young generation thinks about their profession and the future mission of their profession. And as most of you know, one of the first things that you had to answer in your application was, so what is the future of architecture for you, or do you have a project for the future of architecture? And it was a process, and I think that's very important, how to build rituals and protocols if you want to build an institution. The platform itself, it's hard to say that it's an institution, but it has institutional elements. It has a glue that connects things. And if future architecture that annually received between around 400 applications and toured around let's say 100 people every year through different events, was very general in critically addressing architecture as a profession. Now LINA will be more focused. We will work on climate change issues, on climate crisis and ecological crisis. We started in summer, in June, in Ljubljana. We launched the platform with the first meeting, and then in July the call was opened. We received applications now, and you are all invited to the conference in Ljubljana that will happen in 2 weeks, on the 20th and 21st of October. These are our objectives as they were written in the application. and they are based on, on the needs. And if we want to tackle critical issues like climate change, there needs to be more research in architecture. And we need to ask ourselves how we can help, let's say, traditional design practices that do their living from design, still most of them, to be able also to do their living on research, because we will need to find ways for new solutions that will not come just through answering to the questions of the clients and doing business as usual, as most of the offices still do today. So the whole thing works like there's a cluster of institutions, and everyone brings his projects, events, exhibitions, biennial programs on the desk, and this program is offered to young people to apply and say, we want to be a part of this conference, we want to be a part of this summer school, and then they are selected through an open call, and that's how the final program is formed every year. Thank you.
You talked a little bit about the institution and also the organizations who are part of the institution. And we have this pleasure to have some of them in Tbilisi right now. Maybe you can say a little bit more about the organizations involved in LINA, and maybe you can also introduce who we have today in Tbilisi.
Yeah, maybe looking at the last slide, when forming organizations, we wanted to somehow close the whole circle of production of architecture, from knowledge, from education to, let's say, production and final feedbacks from the users, so that let's say education is informed as well by what is going on when architecture gets realized, and what are the demands, so to say. We know that architectural education needs to change a lot, but we don't know how. We have to learn how. We have to unlearn how we educate architects, and we have to learn how to educate them in a new way, so that they will be able to answer to things, to the challenges that they are exposed to today. So there are now 27 institutions in the platform. We call that General Assembly, and they are universities, museums, architecture museums, then small independent institutions, organizations, architectural galleries, biennials, triennials, festivals, publishers. And what's important is that this is also an ecosystem of institutions who at the same time, each of us plays its own role in the platform, but also we can learn from each other. Yeah. We can exchange. A museum can learn from a small publisher in Barcelona a lot, and vice versa.
So maybe we can now start a little bit of introducing the institutions that are sitting right now around the, not table, but around in the circle. Start with ladies. I'll just say your names, but I might be bad with pronunciation, and so you have to help me. So Irhana and Dunja,
yes,
from Sarajevo, right. And representing Lift Special Initiative Days, Nights of Architecture.
Yes.
So all was clear without mistakes.
You managed the first.
Perfect.
We'll shortly introduce our organization and go into talking a little bit about Sarajevo and some of our projects. Temporality is probably the team we deal with the most, so it was very difficult for us to choose projects for a 5-minute presentation, but we are LIFT Spatial Initiatives from Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. We are a non-governmental organization that has been around for quite a while. We started with the festival in 2008 and made the organization in 2010 out of the need for such an actor in Sarajevo. We work with including the local community into the architectural discourse, but also distributing Sarajevo architecture towards the world and bringing the world closer to our architecture. We are 7 in the core team, and each of us, besides working with the organization, works as a traditional practicing architect. And this bridge between research, activism, and traditional practice is maybe the edge we try to explore more and to have the competitive edge there. We'll go more into Sarajevo.
Yeah, so the thing that connects us all is the city that we live in, and most of us were born there. So just a quick overview of the city, so you are kind of familiar, but I urge you to Google it if you were interested more. So Sarajevo is the capital of our country. It has a population of around 275,000 people, which is super, super small compared to Tbilisi, for example, who has over 1 million of population. The larger metropolitan area has 500,000, which was a success because we are a war-torn country as well. So a lot of people were displaced after the war. I just put out some of the major periods that the city is known for, but the most familiar one was the war in 1992-1995, which kind of changed the entire image of the city, not only for the people outside, but for us as well. The post-war period is something that marked our childhoods and our practices and the way we think and work. So this is just a general, like a diagram for you to understand that how the city functions. It's a linear city that has been developing from east to west based on different periods. So in the beginning, the old town in the furthest east is from the Ottoman period, then going towards the west is the Austro-Hungarian, and then going further towards the west is the socialist period of the city, which is probably the one that contributed the most to the development of the city. We always say that Sarajevo is our playground and that we cannot basically exist without it because all of the things, all the inputs that we have is from the city. This is the map of the public buildings that we kind of used and inhabited during our interventions and festival that we have Days of Architecture. And the next project that we kind of want to present that's connected to the theme is the video mapping that we do on the public buildings. So it's we will use an example. The Historical Museum in Sarajevo is one of the most famous buildings built after the Second World War. It is important because it was the first public competition, international competition after the Second World War. And the building was built in 1963. After the war in the 90s, the building was heavily damaged, and the institution of the Historical Museum, the institution itself, kind of fallen apart. So it's struggling today, even today, 30 years after the war, it is struggling to make ends meet. So in 2015 and 2019, we did a video mapping of the building, trying to put it into the spotlight, not only to explain how important it is for the city in its visual and architectural representation, but also to put it into a spotlight with all the problems that they have. So the people who are in charge and the politicians and the administration can somehow help them out. So after 2015, the Historical Museum actually marked a little bit of a growth in their work. We cannot say it's only thanks to us. It would be presumptuous to say that, but I think that we managed to kind of introduce the audience that this building and the institution that is in this building is quite important. This is not the only building that we video mapped, so we did several other buildings in the city, like Vijećnica in Sarajevo was completely destroyed in 1992 and was recently rebuilt, and we had an honor to do a video mapping of that building as well. Maybe I can show it later to you, so you can check it out for people who don't know.
The second project we're going to talk a little bit about is a project connecting two maybe most important periods in the recent history of Sarajevo. Is the period in early 80s and 90s. Sarajevo bobsled, built in early 80s for the Sarajevo Olympic Games, was built in a close proximity to Sarajevo, which is an interesting point because it was such an unfamiliar sport. Wanting to bring it so close to people who did not know anything about it, they decided to build it very close to Sarajevo on a mountain called Trebević. In this period, not only this period of Olympic Games was very important in Sarajevo generally to raise not just infrastructurally and architecturally period in which many things have been pushed on another level. So this bobsled is a very specific example which we wanted to use as in here because of its temporal use right now. So bobsled, as many projects in Bosnia and Herzegovina, have been affected by the war, and since then has not had a function it was primarily built for. But the interesting thing about our bobsled is that being so close in the proximity to Sarajevo, it was accessible to people, so alternative use outside of its primary function was created, and this use is mountain biking, walking, and this new, completely out of ordinary public space has been created in the last 20 years. And we have been interested in exploring this new memory of the place more. So a few years ago, we created a competition to see how can we further develop this. But with recent development and the possibility of bidding for, or a bid for Olympic Games for 2030 with Barcelona, talks about restoring this into its primary function have been mentioned. So now Sarajevo people almost feel a bit nostalgic for the place that has been created in the last 20 years for this temporal function that in a way has transcendent its temporalness. And we created a project recently with Goethe Institute in which we try to understand how can we still keep this memory of the place and this public access and understand how can we combine the function of the bobsled now with the memory that has been created in the last 20 years.
The last project we would want to present to you is the project we did in 2016. I'll just do a quick intro. So Sarajevo after the war in the 90s had only 2 public buildings built for the entire 30 years of the last period. So one of them is the Olympic swimming pool, which has been taken off of the Olympic list because it is we missed the dimensions of the Olympic swimming pools, so it's not as well as we thought it would be. But the second building that is quite important for the city, which is also a public building, is the new Academy of the Performing Arts. It was commissioned, it was an international competition, and architect Jonas Ademović, who is part from Sarajevo, part from New York, won the competition, and this is the building that it's supposed to be built in 2008, but it still hasn't been finished. So in 2016, we wanted to kind of try and raise awareness that it is not okay that we have a construction site for that long, and we kind of inhabited the building and decided to do like a workshop. I have to say, like a personal story, this is the first time that I got in touch with Days of Architecture and Lift. I was a volunteer at the workshop and a member of the workshop, and 2 years later I became a permanent member of the organization. We collected numerous, a huge amount of VHS tapes that we extracted from the boxes, and used this very fragile material that is the film of the VHS to make a hyperbolic paraboloid in the construction site of the Academy of Performing Arts. The material itself is very fragile and very easy to destroy, and in the end, that is me hanging out from the ceiling. It took us 7 days to put it up, and we were guided by Nikola Radejković from Numen from Use, from Zagreb. We put it up, and in the beginning when we did the brainstorming, we knew that we will eventually destroy it at the ending night, at the closing night of the Days of Architecture. So the performance was actually, the part of the performance was to destroy this VHS installation. Our main goal was to also kind of make the people who were in charge for finishing the building kind of hurry up and say like, okay, now you have to finish this because it's been 8 years. And I have to say that after 2016 and our workshop, the building has been almost finished, which is a success for our country, which is obviously very unstable in its practices. But today we almost have it done. It's in, I think, 90% finished. We expect it to be done in next year, and the Academy of Performing Arts will finally have a new building in Sarajevo. And yeah. Can we have the sound as well? Or not? This is the, if it's okay if you don't get it. This is the video of the installation, basically how it looks like. Yeah, also part of the performance was including different actors, people from the academy. So this is one of the most famous actors in our city, in our country, Matevž. And we also had, since we have a lot of friends and partners in the organization who do different things, Ozal Mirkozic is a slacking performer who does performances in the city, and he helped us out to do this kind of performance in the end. We also collaborated with Klabika, who is one of our partners for making super mega giga parties in the city. And that's it basically from us.
A very quick question from my side, and I also ask everybody to get more engaged. Do you do this on annual basis? How you actually operate, and on what timeline?
We can separate it somehow in three, conceptually in three parts. So we have been an annual festival for the longest time, but this year or last year, we decided that it's time that we start with a biennial festival. So we're going to have it every second year, so we have more time to explore everything we're interested in around the theme, because having it every year really is a lot of work. And but besides the festival, we also have Nights of Architecture, which is a more scattered kind of event that happens, well, nowadays once a month, where we explore a specific theme within the framework of the biennial that's incoming. And the third group of events is the projects around all of this, which happen across the months in between. One of the projects we're working on right now is the Architectural Guide for Sarajevo, so it really fits directly there with what we are trying to reach with our organization. So,
thank you. Yes, doing such kind of work annually is quite a lot of work, as you mentioned. Even we as a biennial sometimes have a joke that maybe we can shift and become triennial in the future, but let's see.
I think everyone evolves. You first start annually, then you go every second year, and then you have to go every third year.
Then it goes. And just go circle if Triin, you agree on that you are next, not in the end, and you present right now, if it's okay for you.
Hello, I come from Estonia, which is probably the smallest country which has an independent architectural museum. It locates up in the north near the Baltic Sea. Our neighbors are Finland, Sweden, and Russia. So it's 30 years old. It's a national museum funded by Ministry of Culture. So and it was founded half a year before we regained our independence, so it was still Soviet time, or very end of the Soviet period. And yeah, why museum? Why architecture museum? And this topic of temporality we are here to discuss. It's quite twofold or ambivalent, I think, that museums are built or done for permanent, for eternity, you may say. But I think in museum program and actions, we combine both sides, both this permanent, we do have a collection, we collect for modern period architecture, our personal collection of the architects. But our program is temporary. I mean, we do around 5 exhibitions per year, a lot of public program, excursions, etc. So it's something which is temporary, and also museums. I think architecture museum doesn't exist. It's not like a neutral container. It relates very much, or our program relates very much how architecture as a discipline has been developed during the last 10 or 20 years, and it's kind of mutual interchange between the public image of architecture and how museum actually create this, or help to create this image as well via our program. So who we are? We celebrated our 30th birthday last summer. That's our building. It's old historical salt storage in the middle of Tallinn, old industrial area, now turned into vibrant cultural center. In the right hand, you see some of the buildings erected in the middle of those former industrial areas. So it's maybe a little bit something that the fabric is here in Tbilisi. It's the stuff of 12, and our building is maintained by the state real estate agency. So we are not in a situation that we have to, for our program, we have to find funds, but we have a permanent building or institution to run. So it's both challenge and obligation as well. The museum, as I said, it's collection and it's public program, like the two main activities or purposes also by law, what we should do. And we have 4 floors together, around 3,000 square meters. We have a permanent exhibition space in motion, which is based on our model collection, mostly because, well, how to exhibit architecture. We all know that the buildings are outside of the museum, so it's mostly the drawings, which nobody understands except architects, then photos, and the models are one of the best ways actually everybody loves models. They are like small doll houses and etc. So it's, excursions. We did a workbook to read urban space outside of the museum walls, so it's a museum in the city. We have a lot of school groups coming of those outdoors lessons. And we do also open houses program. We take people to the buildings they usually don't have access to, and it's really popular. In our cellar space, we did a different kind of permanent exhibition, but the space itself is the exhibit, so people can touch, can smell. It has a mirror floor, so the walls are reflecting on the wall, or not wall, so sorry, floor. And so it's really popular among the young people, and there was dancers in the opening. And it was created along with the architecture school, which also works in our premises. It's like a hobby school for the school children. After the normal school, they come to the architecture school and their tutors are all architects. So some exhibition, what kind of exhibitions we do? We are quite free in our program, I must say. So it's quite experimental, and exhibitions which focus on different aspects of architecture. That was one of the most craziest projects we did. In 2016, we brought a piece of a real building to the inside of our exhibition hall. It weighed 14 tons. It was an experiment itself to get it inside because it's on the second floor. And it's one of the buildings which were exploded by terrorists in London in the early 90s. And now the Norman Foster's Gherkin is in the same place. The building was dismantled into pieces and sold. And a couple of Estonian businessmen bought the pieces of the building with the idea to erect it in Tallinn. But it never happened, of course, so the pieces remained in the ship containers or sea containers. And then we do this kind of spatial intervention projects in our program that every 2 years we do this kind of exhibition which intervenes somehow to our space, to our exhibition space. And then we asked one Estonian architectural office called Salto had this idea to bring piece of this building to this exhibition space, and it was really impressive actually to see this front tone of the original building to move towards you. There was a moving thing. Oh, here is the original building which was exploded by the terrorists. Another one of those interventions is it's also how we create the space or idea of the space in our minds. The sound is maybe one of the sound is also maybe one of the things which creates some memories or impressions or emotions. What kind of space could it be or can it be? So we did earlier this year, 2 musicians did this kind of 16-channel sound space in our main hall. So guests can or visitors can sit in the middle of this area and experience this. It was around 10 or 15 minutes long sound space. So it was, again, different, popular, experimental. It's an interior architecture program when volunteers or students of interior architecture department studied the whole weekend in an exhibition space, and when the visitor came, then they showed, like personally, the archival material to the visitor. So it was very intimate experience in a way. Also, critical voice, of course, it was almost, we did this exhibition of feminist questions to architecture 2019. This summer, I think in at least 2 or 3 architectural centers or museums in Europe had a feminist exhibition, and the Danish one has even the same title, the famous Virginia Woolf's title, The Room of One's Own. So it was kind of, funny how ideas and trends also rotate among the architectural institutions and sometimes even the titles. The houses that we need, also our answer to the question of the future of global environment and climate crisis and what architects can do. It was an experimental exhibition. We asked 15 Estonian architectural offices to react to this question, what kind of houses we need in the future. And we built those, and they all got a small amount of money, and they proposed to us or built for us then these kind of small things. Of course, revisiting the Soviet modernism or Soviet legacy is quite important for the history of Estonian architecture. And a very successful exhibition 2 years ago was about summer houses and leisure spaces and architecture connected to this area. And we also have a tab. So Tallinn starts with a T, so it's a little bit older brother of Tbilisi Biennale. So it's the 8th time it takes place now, and it's also, we organize it in cooperation with Estonian Architectural Center, and it takes place in our main hall, and it has like 2 main events. It has a 2-day seminar and the main curatorial exhibition. And this year it was called Edible, Architecture of Metabolism, and the exhibition was Metabolic Home. And there is another image of the opening performance. It was about food and this kind of cycle of food processing and growing the food and dealing with waste, etc. This kind of circular economy idea, and another view of these new materials, how to build in the future, what materials we should use. So you see the bricks made of fungi, and and there is a new some other examples of the future way of building, and it's kind of very much based on academic research. So it's how the architecture is conceived and viewed in the laboratories of different universities in Western Europe and in America mostly. And it's always open call, and this time there was two female curators, one from Barcelona and another from Cooper Union in New York, Lidia Gallipoliti and Areti Markopoulo. And we do also installation in front of them. That's something very temporary as well for 2 years. In every 2 years we change the thing, and it's also very, popular way to make modern architecture loved by, not visited and intrigued by everybody who passes by. So it's a very public place, and visibility is quite great in front of our building. That's this year, 2022, apparently the first building which was funded by the NFT money. So it's like collective ownership of this. Every piece was bought by people who wanted to spend money on that. And we have been part of the Future Architecture program for I don't know, for 6 years, 5 years. And 2019, for example, we did exhibition when Future Architecture Fellows were the tutors in Estonian Academy of Arts, and the result was exhibition which we inserted in the middle of our permanent exhibition. So they did kind of creations which were inspired from our models. And that's those happy young students and tutors all wear black, of course. So it's, thank you and welcome to the museum.
Is your supporter? Or it's
we are part of
public.
Yeah, we are a public institution and we are funded by them, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, it's always nice to see how many people get supported by the public bodies.
As I said, it was almost the last museum established still in the Soviet period. I'm not sure if it would be happening later. Of course, the funding this time is very little, and even now we have, for the program, we have to find funding from the cultural funds or cultural endowment.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll go to the questions once we finish with the presentations.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the Biennale organization for having us here. I'm super happy. So yes, it's a challenge to try to put our work in terms of temporality. I never thought about that. So first of all, who we are, because I could not take the credit of all our projects. These are my partners in crime, and Sofia and Cesar, and we are the core group of all the projects we do. And we work in these three main fields: critical theory, curatorial field, and publishing. This is some of the works we do in the publishing field. The Archifutures book we are produced in the framework of Future Architecture, that we are platform members since 2016. And we also do some collaborations with other platform members, like this newspaper with publishing acts from Daisai. But we also do another kind of books, translations, a series. All the books are a collaborative project with different graphic designers, authors, researchers, of course, translators, copy editors. So the work of each of them is super valuable for all of us to make the book to be what it is. And the exhibitions follows the same philosophy. It's a collaborative work all the time. This is the latest one that we curated just 1 month before the pandemic, so it was on retreat for a while, but then reopened in Matevž, Madrid. And I really like this picture of that exhibition because it somehow explains how we like our books and our projects to be like small cracks and open doors to explore different spaces from one space to the other. And I guess this summarized very well in this Donna Haraway quote that for us it matters how we tell stories. It doesn't matter the media, it can be the exhibition, a book, or it can be even a tweet, but it matters what we are saying and how we want to say it. So when we were asked to talk about temporality, I thought that our books are somehow against temporality, because we don't want to follow this trend that in bookshops, for example, you see the books with the stamp of a new book coming out 3 months, and then it disappears to give space to some more books, because critical thinking doesn't have an expiry date, and the work of our authors is valuable today and will be valuable 10 years from now, I hope. So these are the books that we have been producing in Future Architecture with the writing grant. We have established in the past 3 years, and that we will continue to do in the LINA community, with a slight change that I'm very happy to do, that we will be collaborating with the Irish Architecture Foundation. So the process of selecting the authors and producing the book will be enriched by the collaboration with them. So I'm very curious to see how we are going to do that. This is the other latest book we produced for Future Architecture. It's not out yet because it was stopped from the pandemics, and so the researchers were a little bit late with the text, but also we were late with the production of the book, but it will be out in 1 month from now, I hope. The Archifuture series, it's a perfect example for when I want to talk about temporality, because we produce the books in this temporal space of time, you know, the printing and distributing the book to bookshops. But then the way we create spaces of encounter and spaces of reading with the people who has our books, we think this is atemporal, because you get out of time when you are reading by yourself or in a group. You get in another, let's say, dimension or another mindset to try to understand and to read texts that were produced before you were born or in the real moment, and that can catalyze new ways of thinking for the future. So this detachment is very well represented in this graffiti, that no linear fucking time in our books, I hope. And following that idea, we established in Future Architecture, the Future Architecture Library, that you can have the books that we have produced all in open access there, but then you can also mix up the contents of the book. And this is also a way to disgrace temporality, because you are mixing up contents produced in different moments of time, and then you can have your own compilation and read it in a temporary moment. So this play within a temporality and temporality is something that I find very interesting in our approach to what publishing is and our contribution to the LINA community. We started the Architecture Book Fair as one of the latest projects we did for Future Architecture, and we will repeat in it this year for the LINA Architecture program. We select the curator of the book fair from the Open Call for Fellows, and they are independent to select the books they want to include and the theme they want to follow. But even more interesting is that we create also a set of activities around the book fair. So it can be in digital, so we can gather other geographies and other people that are not based here in Europe, but also we create these spaces of encounter that are physical. So also playing with the physical and the digital, and playing with the temporal and atemporal, it's at the core of our projects all the time. This was the latest installment of the book fair. It was in Barcelona this year in May, and it was very nice because you can see these people making exercise here. So we have this wonderful setup, and people, it was a library more than a book fair. People came to lend the books, they sit down with their comment, we have book presentation, and we have all the people around also doing other activities. So how it informs the reading, and the reading informs the activities you do at the space, are always in dialogue. And I want to finish with this quote by Alberto Manguel relating to the topic of temporality, because for us books are this, you can keep reshelving, cataloging. I know, or I guess you have this experience that reading the same book in different moments of your life tells you different stories. So this is what a temporality is, even if the book was written in a temporary set moment of the history of the author. So this is it. Thank you so much.
Then Martynas, we give floor to you. Martynas represents Architectūros fondas.
Yes, so my name is Martynas Germanavičius. I'm coming from Vilnius, Lithuania, and I'm leading the organization Architectūros fondas. The name, maybe it sounds quite kind of stable, but actually our organization is very nomadic and dynamic. Yes, Architectūros fondas is architecture foundation, but we kind of like to keep it Lithuanian because otherwise it would get mixed maybe with a UK one. So talking about temporality is a really nice way to also reflect upon the organization through time, through the perspective of time. You know, to kind of think about what is temporality in terms of, can we kind of measure what is temporality? I was thinking that it's kind of a subjective feeling of having your, I don't know, personal understanding of how kind of you engage with the space in a certain time. So for me, temporality is a kind of a spatial relation, and I was thinking that how within our organization we work with time and how we work in time. So my presentation will be not only about the activities we're running now, but also about what was already gone or what we kind of stopped doing. So one of the main projects I would say is Pokalbiai. It's kind of recently rebranded project, but it's running since 2009 when the crisis happened. Really, Architectūros fondas emerged as this new platform for various architects to think critically about what we're doing and also to build more of this kind of theory-based practices. So Pokalbiai is basically a series of talks where in one series we have one theme that is explored through 5 different perspectives. So this November we will have our 29th series, so this is quite permanent project. But other projects like there were excursions, an initiative of architects really kind of exploring various cities in Lithuania ended, but it ended up with Open House Vilnius. So maybe you have heard about this project that is kind of worldwide project. We have also in Vilnius these open architecture weekends. So it's one weekend where more than 50 buildings are open. So I also kind of calculated very roughly about how many hours collectively people spend in our event to listen about architecture, and it's quite amazing. Like there are a lot of visits, and this event is like the main architectural event in Vilnius, and having this kind of a successful continuation, we also do a Pastatai Kalba, kind of a brother project in the smaller Lithuanian cities where also people explore their cities, but also a lot of like people are coming to get to know more about the smaller cities within Lithuania. Then there was an initiative also founded by architects who were eager to work more with children and youth and with education, and they were doing these one-day workshops for a few years, which later on turned into traveling architecture workshops. And the format of this project is basically for the 5 days, volunteers of architects and various disciplines are going to one of our villages, and together with local kids, within those 5 days, they create and build a public space. So yeah, it's also been running for a long time, and during the pandemic it also was a nice moment when they stopped and they returned to all those towns to see how things were maintained, or has they kind of vanished, or do they need a repair? So now we are also working on continuation of these previous editions. Then there was an initiative for publishing platform for digital publications that were kind of print on demand. So if you wanted to print it, you could easily print it and bind it on your own. But all of this archive is still in our cloud, and we're working currently now on it. But this initiative also turned into a podcast and publication platform called HTR. And they're working more with the cultural magazines, so they're also trying to infiltrate architectural discourse in the cultural magazines. And there were also two huge projects, the representation in Venice Biennale, the Baltic Pavilion, a joint project with Estonian and Latvians, so Architektūros Fondas was then a producer. And in 2018, a swamp pavilion. And those two projects, even though they ended, I think they inspired us to continue with this more experimental approach to architecture, and to really think about how tools of architecture could be used in different disciplines, or how tools from different disciplines could be applied in architecture. So now we also have this latest project, Experiments Platform, and it's based on the mentorship program where young creatives can develop their ideas together with the help of specialists from various disciplines in various countries. And just to kind of give a quick example, last year we had our first season, so the one experiment was called Neo-Futuristic Walks, and two architects, Goda Verkaitė and Aušra Česnauskytė, were leading these, as they call it, workshops in different cities. So this one was done in 9 Elms, and their approach is to invite people to walk through the city and imagine it, how in the future the labor conditions could look like, how the vegetation would take over some of the structures, and basically how the life will be organized within, I don't know, 50 years, but not through this kind of top-down perspective, but very kind of pedestrian perspective. So they're stopping in different locations and having micro workshops. One of them was a guerrilla gardening workshop where they were spreading bomb seeds in the 9 Elms, very kind of newly developed area in London. And also they did an edition for Vilnius. And this year we have the second edition with this kind of multiple questions and for mentors, and some of them are also coming from Future Architecture Fellows. So with the LINA platform, we also think that Experiments platform would be this kind of a good pair that could work together, and we will try to incorporate fellows from LINA platform to be as a mentors, or maybe to even come as a creators or extra educators. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to all the panelists and to Otar to moderate. I just want to make a short comment on the platform that just started and has been launched in June, and which is a continuation of the Future Architecture platform, where I first visited in 2018, the year when we launched the first edition of the Tbilisi Architecture Biennial, and I think it was really a great experience for us as a newly forming, emerging institution to learn a lot from so many different organizations, and it's always really interesting till now to see like how, also today, to see like how each organization is operating and what kind of events you do, how you adapt to your own places and cities, and yes, like we're really, really happy to have you here, and we will be having more collaboration with LINA platform, and we will have the fellows as well integrated into our programs in the following year and to the next biennial. So we're really, really also looking forward to this work with the LINA community. And so I would like to maybe ask a small question or comment to Matevž, as you have to leave really soon, and yeah, like what are your expectations, and what do you think that will change from the Future Architecture platform to the LINA community? Like, what do you expect? Because now there will be was the first open call, and the first conference will happen in October, in 2 weeks. And also when we were checking the applications, like they were very, very different from the last ones. So yeah, I would like to hear like what is your, are you waiting, like what will happen, what will change?
I think it's hard to say what will change, but we can see that from the time we were writing application to until now, the context in which we are operating already changed. I think it's important to have this structure of collaboration in the times of temporality to learn from each other. Because if in the past the government passed an act and founded a new institution, that very simple. And today institutions are created in a different way. I'm probably talking very much from my own experience when I entered into an institution that was, so to say, frozen in time for 30 years. And that was an institution formed by the government in the past. Today institutions are formed by small acts, by temporary steps that are temporary, but are a part of a strategy that takes you somewhere into a longer period of time. And because the context in which we are operating is changing very dynamically all the time, we need each other to talk to each other, to learn from each other all the time. That's one of the most important things, because if we want to communicate with the public, we have to invent new formats, new ways of creating this dialogue. And the way how you try to do it in Tbilisi, and we saw yesterday at your opening event, how you connect with the community, how you expose some certain topic, it's very important for everyone here, but also for those who are not here to learn about it. Because they are facing some pressing issues in their cities or in their places that they need to address, and they need to learn how to do it. So I probably don't have an answer what will be different in LINA. As you know, also governments still have the power to do something. And they can do it good or bad. And with future architecture, we had to stop in a way because it was politically not possible to operate in Museum of Architecture and Design anymore. And but on the other hand, it proved the resilience of this community to stay together and continue working. And it speaks for itself about the importance to connect and to work together.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can continue continuation to the Tico's question, but now to the institutions that are representing here about their expectations. You have presented your work, but maybe you can also reflect on what's next in the LINA platform from you. And again, this time we start from this side.
Very little time to think. I don't know, like when we joined Future Architecture Platform, it was in 2019, and I joined Fondos only during the pandemic, so 2020. So I already kind of felt more of this virtual collaboration, so I'm also very looking forward to have more of the encounters in physical surroundings. But in general, I think that maybe focus now of LINA platform is as these kind of keywords coming from EU green policy. They are kind of based on sustainability, but I think the current situation is inevitably pushing us to think more about these questions, because as we see when the war started, and also how energetically we're dependent on these fossil fuel resources and how they also shape the politics, I think these questions are very important, and the energy crisis that is coming, or it's started to be felt by most of us, also will shape the profession of architecture in the upcoming years. So I think it's very relevant, the LINA questions, and I think it's also a privilege that we can work on these questions, because I know a lot of also organizations, for example, in Scandinavia, they're closing because they're turning into this more of a commercial side. So it's also very nice that we have a secured funding for doing these researches and working on these topics.
Thank you. Maybe we can continue like one by one.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's an important question that deals with the topic of the Biennale here, no? What's next? So, yeah, well, from our side, as I said, we will keep doing the publishing production of the platform. This year, with this exciting collaboration with the Irish Architecture Foundation, I think we will follow what Matevž was explaining about learning, not only for the fellows to learn about the work on this wide spectrum of institutions, but also for us to don't remain in our comfort zone and keep learning from the freshness of the ideas and their way of doing things. So this is very exciting for us. And also with the book fair, it's the same. It's kind of a learning process and how to deal with the digital and the virtual at the same time, because also, as Martynas was saying, the topics of the LINA platform and our dependence on fossil fuels and all of this, perhaps from our practice as an independent publishing house, doesn't have the impact of a big construction site or something like that, but even though we want to be coherent with the statements of LINA, so the way we produce the books, we print on demand, we print the small print rooms and then reprint when needed to avoid large stocks of books, just doing nothing there in a warehouse. And also we print in different geographies when books are requested in Latin America or in Africa, for example, to avoid shipping of palette with boxes of books. So these small details are our way to responding to their request of LINA, but also to learning how we can be coherent with the statements that we are defending and we are joining. So this is the way we are approaching to that, and as I say, we're looking forward to keep learning more things on how to do that and how to apply it to our own practice.
Thank you, but did I understand correctly that thematically your books will be also somehow reflecting the LINA topics? Yeah.
Well, this I don't know, because we give, of course, the fellows who apply to the open call, they knew they were applying following the topics. But once we select them after the LINA conference in 2 weeks, they have freedom to develop the contents of the books, because we are always searching for new narratives, to avoid this academic jargon in our books and to make them some fresh and to demonstrate that architecture can be written in many different forms, from poetry to literature. So, of course, there is an editorial discussion, and we will try to make them reflect on the topics, but they are free to develop a novel, a poetry book, a set of histories, so we don't want to be the interventionist editors or publishers, so let's see, it will be a surprise for all of us.
No, it works. I think that somebody is really in a hurry, so we just go, please, Triin. Yeah.
Well, for me, or for a museum of architecture, the LINA has maybe two main advantages or points. First is it's a very good network, and we all know that in the current world we need friends, and especially the network of the members. There is 27 several institutions around Europe with whom I've never been met before, otherwise than to meet them twice a year in several places, either in Ljubljana or in some other place in Europe. So that's one of the excellent point. And another is that LINA is perfectly designed pool of new ideas, fresh ideas from young architects. So it's perfect for shopping the new ideas. So thanks.
Yesterday we were walking through the city and we were discussing how the topic of sustainability is super wide, and that we got a series of numerous applications and projects. And I think one of the things that is truly amazing about LINA is the fact that we get to explore what sustainability is. So there's no correct answer. We, as an organization that is part of LINA and LINA in general, we get to explore what can sustainability be. And considering that Irhana here is a sustainability architect who is pushing it for us the most, I will give the microphone to her.
Maybe interesting that in Bosnian society, sustainability might not be the first issue we try to solve, so it's always pushed backwards, trying to solve all other issues. So I think in LIFT we are quite happy to have this as an anchor project in which we have to explore for next 3 years sustainability as a topic. So it makes me and the team very happy.
Any reflections from audience?
All for your presentations, and I kind of also Future Architecture Fellow some years ago, and I know all these people somehow through different projects and events, and very happy that LINA exists, and you kind of recreated again this idea of community and kind of working together. So I will more reflect on what you all said now, and I'm wondering how we can convince people to change, ourselves as well, to change the lifestyle, to not shop ideas, or to not have this attitude of shopping the ideas, but actually to, to spend, okay, let's put it basic, to use less water, to spend less money, to share resources and across territories and continents, because it's very sad that we have to learn from the building and the life of the people that we visited yesterday, knowing that architectural practice went from, very, modernist projects, and everything was always very studied, designed, measure of man, woman, whatever it is, mostly man. So, and then I think other disciplines advanced a bit more in this exploration of themes like care, like feminist theory, or we can list can be very long, but what architects and urbanists are doing all the time, and I experienced that myself through the education, it's just dividing all the time the profession between different urbanisms, different architectures, different... so I don't know how far this can go, but it's still pretty much the same what we started in the 50s. It's just different form, and it's more difficult today to take position of change. So yeah, let's see. I'm very curious. Yeah, it was more comment, and I don't have any question because you explain very well what you want to do actually. So yeah, but shopping, please, don't shop.
Anyone wants to reflect on the comment? No? Yes, please.
Yeah, I want to say something that I forgot that it's not related with the comment, which I agree very much. But no, for example, having Armina here that was a fellow of virtual architecture, there is something very important in the platform that is the sense of not only community but also friendship. You know, this I think this makes even more relevant the work we are trying to do, because at the beginning when I joined the platform I thought, okay, if we are going to be friends of these people, we are going to be in our small bubble of thinking all the same, but the diversity of the institutions and then the open call, which is open as the name says, brings together many different ways of thinking and ways to approach to different topics. But at the end, you can have these very respectful and careful discussions with all the people and have different levels and different understandings of what friendship is, that I think personally that is something very needed nowadays in the political, social, and cultural environment we are living. Is for me something very important and relevant. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. You wanted to say something, Triin?
No, I just thinking about this pool of ideas, and maybe this nowadays this society of social media and this, we have overabundance of a lot of brilliant ideas actually. Everybody is promoting himself or herself, her ideas. Sometimes I feel that there is too much ideas how to save the world, so it's but it's our agency as cultural institutions is to select the ones we consider important and then to give a platform to them. So it's maybe this which I meant with this shopping as well. Sorry.
Thanks everyone. I'm Ed, by the way. I don't know if I met everybody. I found all this very interesting. I'm not an architectural specialist, but an anthropologist, and think in my research a lot about time and permanence or temporality, temporariness, and so on. And I guess, I mean, I also don't know if I exactly have a question, but starting with Matevž and talking about how people imagine the future and then hearing about your interactions and your projects, I found it really interesting that the response, to this crisis on multiple levels, questions of ecological crisis and war and general, destruction in a lot of areas, is something that is small scale. It's improvised. It's collaborative. It's, I think, nomadic was the word that Martynas used to describe the kind of the practice in this organization, but maybe something that's more generally there. And it kind of made me think in relation to where we were yesterday and some of the physical, architectural traces of earlier times that still exist in a lot of the world. Those things were built, and this building we were in yesterday, despite, of course, being in a condition that is far from its original one, is still so physically present. You kind of still felt very safe walking around the structure because it's very solid, even if it doesn't look on the surface like it's very well looked after. And it made me think about how now responses to crisis, there's I guess, conversation about should things be small scale, renewable, built to be temporarily okay, but constantly renewed, materials used to be more sustainable, maybe, even on a very, very basic low-level understanding of architecture, more wood and more, sustainable materials like that. And it made me think whether there's space now for building anything that's really big and solid. If you want to make something that answers a crisis of temporariness? Do you make something that will last 100, 150, 200 years? These kind of, should architectural projects be based on long lasting projects because of the scarcity of materials and things, or should they be short-term renewable things? That kind of, how that temporality is expressed in real projects made me, it just, I guess your comments made me kind of think about this more in relation to 20th century projects, where people were thinking a lot less about the availability of materials. They were thinking in terms of an endless progress towards some kind of eventual utopia, and they were thinking that they were not really constrained by material limits, and yet they built things that would last for centuries, potentially. That sort of almost paradox there. Anyway, those are just some random reflections, but thank you, everyone.
No, it's just interesting for me when temporality starts and when we stop thinking about permanence in architecture, which maybe is a ridiculous thing to think about, how long can it last? I feel like once we are free from this permanence element, we feel the environment more and we're ready to experiment more and find solutions which are more maybe humane. I feel like architecture that can overcome so long at some point is in a way inhumane, or like we're talking about very monumental buildings in that case. But I wanted to go back to Armina. We make things based on the man or woman, hopefully soon. But it is inevitable that in a way everything we have done since our existence is removing the nature and making what we need. And every time we talk about it, we put the man as the main element of the space, but can't it be nature as the main element, and then we adapting backwards to it? So I feel like everything I believe in as an architect is maybe just a bit wrong from the beginning. So I'm always going all the way back to the start and thinking, why does it all have to be changed completely for us to exist on the planet? So how can we make a complete restructure to the way we think as humans is, for me, a question that's very interesting. And how do we reach this? How do we understand how to live with nature and not against it, really?
I think you opened an interesting line of discussion, because I believe that sustainability is permanent. The permanent things are the sustainable things, not the temporary things are not sustainable. So the question is how to create this permanence, the physical permanence, but also the permanence in social structures. And I believe it needs to be a framework that basically is open and generous, that can adopt several things, that can host several things. And that's the question. How do we create these frameworks and systems that are permanent and sustainable and can host temporary things that can then even empower them to stay?
You say something very important, Matevž. I think one way to move forward to what Armina was saying in the USA is not thinking in architecture about objects but as systems. You use this word, and I think we need to highlight that word here in the panel because it's a way to move on, because systems can have different scales, different contexts. They can be applied in a museum, in an institution, in a festival, and in a publishing house, and they are adaptable and scalable and can be perhaps one of the ways to move forward. I don't know, just thinking out loud.
Maybe just about this permanence and temporality, and one of the arguments and discussions very much in forefront in architecture nowadays is don't demolish but transform. So we have built enough in 20th century existing structures or even earlier that maybe it's self-suicide for the architects to say so, but I mean not to create anything new but just transform existing structures. But maybe it's also reality in many places in Western European cities, for example, which have built enough already, which are big enough already, or dense enough. So, and also it refers to the building we visited yesterday. Maybe transforming it would be also one of the solutions.
Speaking of temporality, my time will run out.
Yeah. So basically, I think we're having quite a good conversation here, but considering also that... Sorry? We have 5 minutes. Yeah, perfect. But I think it really shows that the thematic point that LINA has is very important and very urgent also for everybody to be discussed. And I have been hearing this a lot about the learning and exchanging. And I think we are also, as a pioneer, very much looking for this learning and exchanging with the different institutions. Because, as I said, this is a very important topic and very urgent topic to discuss and approach. I'm sorry. With this, maybe we can close it up a little bit, become even more informal somewhere in the courtyard or in the room. Thank you very much for being here today, Matevž. Thank you very much, and all the participants, of course, for being here. It has been a pleasure, and some of you will meet again, and some have to depart already today. So thank you very much, and I really hope that we will have a very fruitful cooperation in the future.
So welcome back to the second part of our meeting today. Just on the technical side, there is some translation provided from English into Georgian and from Georgian into English. So anyone who needs the speakers, you can take it there next to the booth, and there are 2 channels you can really switch and find the language that you need. So, Tina will be presenting the second panel now, and I will be having a very short presentation of the Cultural Rights Manual. So, Lega will be helping me with the switching stuff. It will be very short, actually. თუ შეიძლება ქართულად ვილაპარაკებ, იმიტომ თვითონ სლაიდები არის ინგლისურად და შესაბამისად თარგმანიც იქნება ინგლისურად. ეს არის პრეზენტაცია კულტურული უფლებების გზამკვლევის, რომელიც გამოიცა ახალი ფონდის მიერ, ეს არის დანიის მთავრობის მიერ დაფინანსებული პროგრამა და ის გულისხმობს ბევრ სხვადასხვა აქტივობას, მათ შორის ბიენალეს დროს სიმპოზიუმის ერთ-ერთი ნაწილის დაფინანსებასაც და ეს რა არის ახლა ეს კულტურის უფლებების გზამკვლევი. პრინციპში ის პრინციპები, რომელიც მასში არის გათვალისწინებული, მეტნაკლებად ხდება მათი დაცვა საქართველოში, მაგრამ როგორც ასეთი ტერმინოლოგიის დონეზე ამ სახელწოდებით ბევრისთვის არ არის გასაგები. როგორც თქვი, ამ პროგრამას აფინანსებს ახალი დემოკრატიის ფონდი და დანიური კულტურის ინსტიტუტი და ამ შემთხვევაში მე წარმოვადგენ 2 ორგანიზაციას, შეიძლება ითქვას, ერთი არის კულტურისა და მენეჯმენტის ლაბორატორია და მეორე თბილისის არქიტექტურის ბიენალე და რას გულისხმობს ახლა ეს გამოცემა არსებობს ინგლისური ვარიანტი, შესაბამისად არის თარგმნილი უკვე ქართული ვარიანტიც, მაგრამ ჯერჯერობით დიზაინი არის გასაკეთებელი და სულ ცოტა ხანში იქნება ქართული ვერსიაც მზად იმისთვის, ვისაც აინტერესებს ამის ქართულად გაცნობა და ეს ეხება ზუსტად იმ უფლებებს, რომელიც უნდა იქნას დაცული კულტურის სფეროში მისი სხვადასხვა წარმომადგენლის მიერ და წარმომადგენლებთან მიმართებაში. რაც გულისხმობს ბევრ სხვადასხვა პუნქტს, ეს არის ძირითადად იგივე, რაც ზოგადად ადამიანის უფლებების დაცვის პუნქტები, თუმცა აქ არსებობს რაღაცა კონკრეტული დამატებებიც და უფრო კარგად და გავრცობილად არის აქ დაცული ადამიანის უფლებები. ანუ ეს გულისხმობს ის მიდგომა, რომელიც გამოიყენება კულტურის უფლებების დაცვაში, გულისხმობს სწორედ იმას, რომ კულტურის სფეროს წარმომადგენლებს უნდა ქონდეთ შექმნილი ყველანაირი პირობები თვითგამოხატვისთვის, უნდა იყოს ეს ინკლუზიური და ასევე სხვა ადამიანებს უნდა ქონდეთ წვდომა რაღაცნაირად ამ პროდუქტებზე, რომელსაც ისინი ქმნიან. გულისხმობს ძალიან ბევრი სხვადასხვა სფეროს ადამიანის ჩართულობას და შეიძლება ითქვას, რომ ეს არის 4 ძირითადი პუნქტი, რომელსაც ეს ყველაფერი ითვალისწინებს. ეს არის უფლება, რომ მიიღო განათლება, უფლება, რომ მონაწილეობა მიიღო კულტურულ ცხოვრებაში, უფლება, რომ მიიღო რაღაც დადებითად გამოიყენო სამეცნიერო პროგრესი და ასევე ავტორების უფლებები, მაგრამ ამ გამოცემაში ყველაფერზე არ არის ლაპარაკი, შეუძლებელი იყო უბრალოდ ამ ყველაფრის მოცვა, მით უმეტეს რომ არის სადღაც 50 გვერდიანი ბროშურა, არის ძირითადი პუნქტები გათვალისწინებული და ძირითადად კონცენტრაცია არის კულტურული სექტორის სფეროში არსებულ უფლებებზე. უნდა ითქვას, რომ 2009 წელს შეიქმნა ზუსტად ეს კომისია, დაინიშნა სპეციალურად ადამიანი, რომელიც არის პასუხისმგებელი, ხდება სხვადასხვა ანგარიშების შედგენა, იმის მიხედვით თქვა სხვა ქვეყანაში რა სიტუაცია, ვინ როგორ მდგომარეობაში, ვის რამდენად აქვს თვითგამოხატვის საშუალება. და უნდა ითქვას ისიც, რომ საკმაოდ ბევრი ინფორმაცია არის თავმოყრილი ამ გამოცემაში და არის ასევე სხვადასხვა ლინკები სხვადასხვა ინფორმაციას ზეწუდომისთვის, ანუ ისეთები როგორც არის თქვათ იმ ადამიანებისთვის შექმნილი უსაფრთხო ადგილები, რომლებსაც თქვათ რომელთა უფლებებიც შეიძლება ირღვევა კულტურის სფეროში, როგორ დახმარება შეგიძლიათ მიიღოთ სამართლებრივ დონეზე, რა კვლევები შეგიძლიათ ჩაატაროთ, რომელი ორგანიზაციები მუშაობს ამ ყველაფერზე და რა ქსელები არსებობს ამ სფეროში. ანუ შესაბამისად ხედავთ აქ, რომ არის გენდერული საკითხებიც გათვალისწინებული, ეს ყველაფერი ეხება არის კულტურის უფლებებთან მიმართებაში. თქვათ როგორც თქვი, ორგანიზაციები, სხვა მექანიზმები, პროცედურები, რომ ვის შეიძლება მიმართოთ, თუ რაღაც უფლებები ირღვევა და ასე შემდეგ. ეს არის ის ვებგვერდი, საიდანაც ეს შეგიძლიათ ინგლისური ვერსია ჩამოტვირთოთ, ქართული ვერსია იქნება ძალიან ცოტა ხანში დაიდება ორგანიზაციის კულტურისა და მენეჯმენტის ლაბორატორია Facebook გვერდზეც და ვებსაიტზეც, როცა მზად იქნება, ასე რომ შესაბამისად ადევნეთ თვალყური ამ გვერდებს, რომ ეს ქართული ვერსიაც შეძლოთ ჩამოტვირთოთ. ძალიან დიდი მადლობა.